Hello, welcome to Quackalope, and today I'm going to be bringing you a Kickstarter preview of Cryptic Explorers. This is a asymmetrical dungeon crawl where one player controls the goddess of death, and another 1, 2, or 3 players control a team of Cryptic Explorers as they dive into the realms of death, searching for knowledge of death itself and mortality, and trying to escape back to Earth, where they can bring that knowledge and bring that power. Now, I have to say, right from the outset, I have had a fantastic time diving into this game, exploring the lore, learning the rules, being able to play the different kind of factions or the different abilities of this whole stack of character cards here and the 2 different goddesses that I have on hand. If you like dungeon crawlers, if you like dark, bleary, push you to the edge of insanity type of games where you're struggling, and if you win as the Cryptonauts, you'll feel like you were losing the whole way up until the point that you teleport out with the Knowledge of Death cards, this game is fantastic. I absolutely love the art style. I really enjoyed being able to build out different squads from the whole stack of different playable characters that you have, each with their own different unique abilities and mechanics that you unlock as you gain experience or soul tokens throughout the board here. The 2 different goddesses that I received are unique and diverse and powerful, and they play notably in different ways. They also change the dynamic of the board state quite a bit. And on top of that, I have this player board and then another one directly underneath it. And both of these boards have different realms, different layouts, different terrain patterns, different mechanics based on what your mission or what you're trying to accomplish. There's a lot of depth in every single element of this game, and I've had a really good time playing it. If you're watching this just to see or determine if it's a good dungeon crawler, it is. You should back it. It's really good. That being said, if you're watching this to learn a little bit more about the game as a whole, what a dungeon crawler is, what all these different factions and items and tokens are, stay tuned, because we're going to go through all of that. We're going to dive into why I really enjoy this game. We're going to dive into some of the different mechanics, the way you're playing, some of the things that I think make this game so unique, and some of the things I'm a little bit more critical on, or at least some elements that may or may not make this game right for your gaming group specifically. That being said, this is a prototype copy. The publishers over at Temptest Tome Games were kind enough to send me a preview copy so that I could get this content out to you before the Kickstarter launched. But please keep that in mind. Some of the rules, the mechanics, some of these little token pieces, even the cards and the boards, while close to finalized and certainly playable, are still being tweaked as we speak. I've given some feedback of my criticism of the game to the developers, and they've been really responsive. They've also been playtesting and adjusting rules mechanics, making the rulebook as easy to understand as possible, working on some of the finer details like these tokens over here, which honestly were a little bit hard to follow. So while the foundation of the game in this prototype is here, there are still some adjustments or developments going on behind the scenes. And so by the time the Kickstarter launches, and then along with that, by the time a copy gets printed and in your hands, you will certainly see some changes from the game that I'm covering here. Now that all that prototype kind of periphery stuff is out of the way, let's go ahead and dive directly into this game, into Cryptic Explorers, so I can explain to you why I really like it. Cryptic Explorers is a asymmetrical kind of dungeon crawl style game where one player is controlling one of these goddesses. She is the goddess of this realm of death. She'll be spawning minions, gaining power, just creating hazards and trying to devour or rot or kill the Cryptonauts. The Cryptonauts will be divided into 2 or 3 separate teams depending on how many people you're playing with, and they'll be exploring the realms of death, picking up soul tokens, opening doors, destroying monuments, battling the goddess and all of her little minions, and along the way trying to accomplish a few different things. First off, picking up artifact tokens so that you can gain special abilities, powers, unlock unique features for each of your characters, but along with that, each one of these maps have specific conditions you have to meet or accomplish in order to get Knowledge of Death cards. These Knowledge of Death cards are the currency. You're trying to get 3 of them so that you're able to teleport out of this realm of death, return to Earth, and win the game. The goddess is just doing her very best to prevent you from getting these Knowledge of Death cards and hopefully kill you before you're able to teleport out, or before at least 2 members of your squad are able to teleport out. On this map specifically, there are 3 main goals. First, you can see these little spindly leg type things. This is a frozen tundra map where you have this large demon-like creature frozen up here at the top, and one of the goals you're trying to accomplish is to pick up these little legs, or these talons, and bring them and deliver them over here to this monument. Return them to the beast that lost them. If you do that with all 3, you gain 1 Knowledge of Death card, and some other crazy things happen. The other thing that is unique to this map specifically are these statues. These statues will rotate throughout every round of the game during the upkeep phase, or the beginning phase, and if you're standing in the line of sight, they will freeze your Cryptonaut Explorers, making them immobilized for at least a single turn. Now, the challenge associated with that is you want to look death directly in the eyes. So on this map, the second objective, the second goal, is to have at least 1 Cryptonaut Explorer frozen on each one of these 3 statues all at the same time. So you want to stare death down to gain another Knowledge of Death card. On top of that, there are 3 artifacts which each give you another Knowledge of Death apiece. So there's a potential total of 5. You need to collect 3, and 1 of those have to be from one of the 2 objectives. Then, easier said than done, you can teleport out as long as 2 Cryptonauts are standing next to each other, and you've won the game. So in essence, that's what the core of this game is all about. It's this tactile battle simulator where the goddess is doing her best to destroy the Cryptonauts, and the Cryptonauts are trying to accomplish their mission and get out as quickly as possible, because the longer they remain in this realm of death, the harder and harder and harder this game is going to become. And I promise you, this is one of those games that feels like you're losing up until the very moment that you win. It's one of the reasons I like it so much. It is always a struggle, and in some cases, the goddess is hands down overpowered. But that doesn't mean you can't scurry past, you can't sprint through the dungeon, you can't plan out just the right type of squad to still confound her. There's always a chance, and while the odds may not be on your side, you still feel like you might be able to squeeze out a victory if you play your cards, unlock your abilities, and potentially get a moderate amount of lucky. So I've covered the overview of what I really like about this game. Let's start going kind of point by point. I have a system that I typically follow when it comes to reviews. I'm going to loosely go through that, trying to cover as much of the elements or pieces of this game as I can. I will have all of those little subcategories linked in the description of this video, so if you just want to skip to the theme and design, or whether or not this is good at different player counts, all of those will be tagged down in the description, so go check that out. You can find out the specific information that you're looking for. So on the box here, this game says that it's for 2 to 4 players, takes 2 to 3 hours, and is for about 14 years and up. As far as the best app player count, I'd have to say that I prefer this game at 2 or 3 players. 4 splits the squads up in a way that makes it a little bit hard to use some of these abilities, and makes turns move a little bit slower because you're only controlling 2 people. And with a player elimination element in this game, your squad members can die. There is a chance that in a 4-player game, 1 squad gets wiped out fairly early because they confront the goddess quickly, while the other squads run around the board. At 3 players, you split up into 2 teams of 3, making the game a little bit more dynamic and really honing in on some of these squad-like abilities. You're able to either work as a unit to move through this dungeon, a few kind of providing a barrier while the others go accomplish tasks, or one of my favorite ways to play is you sort of start in 2 locations and you split up and you coalesce in a central zone. So you each accomplish tasks on a part of the board, really confounding or frustrating the goddess, and then you both show up at that final location to teleport out. At a 2-player game, you're each playing one side, one person controlling the goddess, the other controlling the squads. I don't recommend that for your first few playthroughs. However, I do really like the dynamic that a two-player game has. You're able to be as strategic as possible while you move your pieces across the board, but it does require you to manage 6 characters instead of 3, so you need to be more experienced with what your squad can do, what abilities you have, and how you want to chain or react those abilities in order to win or accomplish your mission. The abilities on these character cards are extremely powerful, but only if you pay attention to them and only if you use them as effectively as possible. And to win the game, you're going to need to be able to do that. So for me, I'd say this game plays best at 3 players, where you each have 2 squads of 3 to pay attention to. As far as the age range, 14 up is going to be appropriate. This is a darker themed game. You can tell from the aesthetic, which I love, but there is some darker themed imagery, there is some language and some stories that deal with things in a little bit more of a brutal fashion. For instance, all of these Knowledge of Death cards are flavor text. They're little stories or elements or pieces of death that you're discovering. They do deal with some graphic elements. As far as playtime goes, I do think 2 hours is just about right. It doesn't take too long to set up the board, but you do need to go through and make sure all of your tokens are in the right areas. You need to go through and plan out your squad. Whoever's playing the goddess will need to make sure that they're familiar with the specific abilities of their goddess deck and whatever map or realm of death they're playing on. Along with that, for the first few games, it'll probably take you a little bit longer than average. It did take us a solid 30 to 45 minutes to work our way through all of the components, through all of the different mechanics, and learn as quickly and fluidly as possible how to get this game to the table and how to play it. I do know the developers are refining the rulebook, making that as easy as possible, and they've been really receptive to feedback. However, it is a slightly more than complex game with its asymmetrical nature, so it did take some time for us to learn and figure out. Along with that level of complexity, I would say this game is likely not new gamer friendly. It's just a little bit heavier than what I would traditionally introduce a new gamer to. The exception to that rule would be someone who is captivated by or really loves the art style, so they're willing to buy in and put the time in to learn this game. And if you're playing with someone who could be a DM to some degree, someone who's familiar with both the squad's abilities and the goddess deck, you could probably walk a new gamer through the flow of the game. The hardest part to getting into this game is learning the game. The abilities, the soul tokens, keeping track of what your squads can do, understanding what your objective is here on the Realm of Death, and what you need to do to win the game. Then you dive into the strategy of it, right? Where do you move your people? How fast do you push forward? What's the best way to prevent the goddess from either halting your progress or just driving you into the ground? I think that if you were playing with someone who was captivated by the lore and aesthetic of the game, and you had a DM, you could likely introduce a new gamer to this game. But I don't think this is a new gamer friendly game. Let's next touch on the replayability of this game. There is a lot of replayability packed into Cryptic Explorers. I know on the Kickstarter there's going to be a whole mix of different boards, each with their own unique objectives and terrain environment and complexity. Along with that, you'll have different goddesses with their own unique stack or deck of cards, each with their own mechanics and custom ways of playing that make them really, really dynamic. There's a lot you can learn just from a single goddess deck, and a lot of planning and push and pulling that you can do. Finally, you have this whole stack of Cryptic Explorer cards. These are squad members that you can build out your team with. There is a ton of replayability right here in this prototype copy. I would say there's enough replayability right here in the prototype copy that I don't need the other 2 boards. I don't need the other goddess decks. I don't need more Kryptonauts. But I know they're going to be there and they're going to give them to you, and I want them. I really do. There's really 2 main elements of replayability in this game. First off, exploring new options. So exploring new realms of death, trying to accomplish different objectives from what you tried last time, using a different squad or playing against a different goddess. But on top of that, another charming part of this game when it comes to replayability is just going to be running with the same squad against the same goddess in the same realm of death and trying to have a different outcome, learning your maneuvers or trying to perfect the way that you play the board. So there's a lot of depth if you want variety. There's also a lot of depth if you just want to perfect your strategy with a team that you really like. Along with that, the lore book, the cards, the artifacts. I mean, I'm only picking up 3 artifacts on this game board, but there is a pile of artifacts for me to find. So there's enough in this prototype copy that I never repeated an artifact twice, and those things have really, really cool, unique, powerful abilities that change the game state in different ways. They make the goddess at least cringe a slight bit. And these Knowledge of Death cards, my prototype copy has a whole pile of them. I'm sure there'll end up being more, and each one has a wall of flavor text. So while I was playing the game and pulling artifact cards, pulling Knowledge of Death cards, I also never repeated a Knowledge of Death card. That's really cool. That means that the story and the world and the lore felt unique every time I dove back in. And as someone that really, really leans heavily on that lore or that theme mechanic, I really, really appreciate this. Next, I want to touch on the quality of the game, the components, and the theme and design. Now, do remember, keep in context, this is a prototype copy, and so the final copy will be different. I can't speak towards what the final production copy will be like, but as far as the quality of production on this prototype alone, I'm really genuinely satisfied. I don't need a whole stack of miniatures to run this game. I think these cardboard tokens work well. I was easily able to identify each one of my Cryptic Explorers based on their face icon that is tied over here to their card. The only element that I had a challenge with, or that I really struggled with, are going to be the tokens. And I've brought this up to the developers. I just had a hard time tracking or identifying which tokens indicated what. There was a lot that kind of splayed across the board once you had things going. So you had a board over here that had your health tokens, your stamina tokens, prepared tokens, rot tokens. There was just a lot of little bits that were going on. Outside of that, the artwork, the theme, the lore, it's just really pretty. When I first saw this game, I have to be honest, I was drawn because of the artwork, but I also thought the artwork might be a significant challenge. I was concerned that this board would be hard to read. It's different hues of black, gray, and white, and at first glance, it seems really messy or chaotic. It's a lovely piece of art, but it doesn't scream playable content. But that was never a problem for me or the people that I played this game with. As soon as we sat down and we started laying out the tokens, we started just paying a little bit closer attention to exactly what's going on here on the board. Everything came through really clean, and it was really easy to play on. You know these different terrain types. You know where you can move. It's clear where the walls and barriers are. These black pits are clearly black pits, and you can't move over them unless you have an ability that specifically allows you to do so. And then having little imprints where you place all your tokens helps us set up and design the board. So there's not a lot of setup when it comes to laying things out, and they also help indicate where different barriers or elements or items are. I thought the artwork was lovely, but I was concerned the board was going to be a challenge to play on, and I can reassure you, at least from my perspective and my gaming group, that was never the case. The way the game plays also feeds heavily into the theme. You really do feel like this squad of kind of weaker creatures diving into a realm of death. The mechanics on these different realms of death work really well to reinforce the specific realm that you're in. Along with that, the goddesses each play unique to their own abilities. There's one specific one in here, Mycothis, who is her rotting majesty, who just starts infecting. She'll send these creatures that rush you and explode, and slowly rot starts creeping into your suit, and you start feeling yourself decay, your energy leaves, your health starts reducing. It's just really, really gross and really, really nice. Along with that, there is a whole world and kind of flavor text system built into the rulebook and built into these realms of death cards. There is a whole world that the designers have thought about, a whole kind of lore behind the gameplay, and you can really tell that that lore, that design, they've both influenced each other quite a lot. I really appreciate a game like this that's thought about why things are happening, that's thought about what you're trying to accomplish, what the mission of your team is, and what each of these goddesses kind of control when it comes to the realm, why these realms might exist, and what the objectives of each party or each faction should be. From my perspective, it seems like it's all been thought through and paid attention to and developed somewhere on someone's notepad kind of off in a corner. If you're looking at the rulebook, if you go take the time to look through that, you'll see that there are blocks of flavor text every few chapters introducing a new element or a new storyline into what your Cryptonauts are doing and what the organization behind them wants as they send them into this realm, as they send them into the realm of death to try to gain knowledge and power. I'm going to go ahead and read a few of these cards here just to show you what I'm talking about, because they really are quite lovely. You notice a spider web. You engage the zoom on your optical interface to take a closer look. As the patterns fill your view, a confused state of mind settles upon you. A vision. A woman in the shadows has what appears to be a large moth on her wrist. My sister is a twin, she explains, but that's the one who wears a mirror. I'm the other side, see? As you try to think of how to respond, she gestures you to a mirror on the wall. A pale woman is pounding against the glass and screaming, but there is no sound. All those little things coming in and out have caused a stirring. You blink and stare into the spiderweb as the dream dissipates. Knowledge of death. You look down at your feet and suddenly realize you are standing on what appears to be a panel from a large fresco, depicting Shazik, standing atop a mountain with a colossal doorway in it. Within this ominous gateway is a jumble of bones, and in front of it what appears to be a stone wheel or a disc marked with an indecipherable characters. You snap a few stills through your optical interface and move on. Knowledge of death. You discover what appears to be a human skeleton, coated with a thick layer of verdant green moss. It seems like these are the remains of some unfortunate Cryptonaut. But where is the suit? As you hunch down to take a closer look, you notice a small movement inside the ribcage. With your weapon at the ready to defend against the possibility of hostile local fauna, you quickly pull out a specimen capsule and bring it crashing down through the rotten sternum with a wet crunch. After quickly sealing the container, you hold it up. You are both fascinated and disgusted by what you see. The thing is clearly a fungus of some kind, poisonous red with a long fringe of white, verdant gills. It throbs and beats like a twisted parody of a human heart, thumping against the wall of the capsule and leaking black goo. So there's a few of these knowledge of death cards. I just really love living in the lore of this game, and every time I pull one of those, I make the game table stop so I can read it aloud and just dive deeper into whatever's happening in this world. But let's move past that lore section of this conversation, because I'll remain there for an extended period of time. In fact, I probably have just done so. And let's talk a little bit more about player interaction and the elements of luck versus skill in this game. Player interaction is heavy. There is a team element of this game where you're working together, but this team does mandate and require someone to play the goddess, and the goddess's mission is to destroy the other players. So, if you like heavy player interaction, this game is perfect. That being said, if you have a player in your gaming group who really doesn't like direct player interaction or doesn't like someone else's choices being the cause of their downfall, this is a game that does require that element in order to play. When it comes to luck versus skill, there's really only one major luck component of this game, and that's when you resolve an attack or an action or try to, disengage with one of the goddess's minions. You do roll 1d6. Oftentimes that can be mediated in some ways, whether it's leveling up your stats, having enough stamina at your reserve so that you can re-roll that dice. So there are a lot of functions that mediate that skill check. That being said, there are some situations where your skill check will just not go the way you hoped or expected it to go, even if the odds were in your favor. And on the other side of that, with dice rolling, there are some times where the odds are entirely against you, and you'll roll a perfect result, and you'll resolve a kind of action or something will happen that you and the goddess player didn't see coming at all. However, this game, I would say, leans heavier on the skill side of things than the luck side of things. Building out the correct squad, moving in kind of a tactical pattern across this board, knowing where your weak spots are, knowing what you need to upgrade or accomplish first in order to complete your objectives. All of those elements come heavy into play in this game, and so I would see this way more as a tactical dungeon crawler than as a luck-based or a dice-chucking dungeon crawler. The same thing is true with the goddess. How she spends her power, who she attacks first, where she tries to cut off the Cryptic Explorers. All of those decisions are very tactical, and the luck element comes in with a single dice roll that oftentimes can be managed or mediated the more experienced you are with the game. All that being said, I really like Cryptic Explorers, and if I haven't made that clear at this point in the video, then I don't know what I've been doing with the last 15 minutes of your time. This game is a real beauty when it comes to kind of a dungeon crawler world, and I'm really excited to have my own officially printed and produced copy of this game so I can get it out to the table a few more times. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to give this game a close look before the Kickstarter went live. I want to thank the team over at Temptest Tome Games for sending me this prototype copy. Good job, guys. I'm really excited to get this one to the table. Whatever the case, guys, if you've watched to this point in the video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think of this game. Is the aesthetic something that drew your attention to it? Do you think the gameplay looks like something that would be right for you and your gaming group, or not? Let me know either way. Whatever you do, though, remember to do the important thing. Get out and play some games. We'll see you next time. Thank you.